proper eye lead time. Now that's a new term for you folks, and what we mean by eye lead time is how far do you look down the road as you're driving, looking for anything that may happen that may affect your path of travel. The correct answer for the CDL test is you must look down the road at least 12 to 15 seconds. 12 to 15 seconds is a distance at highway speeds of about a quarter of a mile. In the city, 12 to 15 seconds would be 2 to 3 city blocks. Now, again, how do you know how far 12 to 15 seconds is? And just like the other example about following distance that we gave, it's the same way here with the eye lead time. You will look at a point that will take you 12 to 15 seconds to reach at whatever speed that you're driving. You can look down the road and look for an overpass or an underpass or a highway sign and start counting 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and keep doing that until you reach that sign and see what number you've reached. And it should be between 12 to 15 seconds. If you'll practice that on a routine basis, every time you're out driving, you'll get to the point that you'll know exactly about how far 12 to 15 seconds is. Now, the reason they want you to do that is real simple. Most people, as they're driving down the road, only look at a point that will take them 3 or 4 seconds to reach. In other words, as they're driving, they're actually looking down. They may be right behind another vehicle, and they're just looking at the back of that vehicle. And anything that will happen on down the road, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 seconds further, they can't see. So what can happen is that if you're driving down the road and you're only looking 3 to 4 seconds in front of you, and just beyond that an accident happens, and maybe the road has become blocked now, you won't see it until you get there. But had you been looking 12 to 15 seconds down the road, you can see that happen and begin to slow down safely so as to avoid getting involved in the accident. That's why you always try to look, and this is what we call eye lead time, 12 to 15 seconds down the road. For the average driver on dry pavement and with the brakes properly adjusted, about how long will it take to stop the vehicle in an emergency situation? And this is one of the questions that always just amaze me. What we're saying is that as you drive down the road, how long would it take you to stop that truck or stop that bus if an emergency happened and you had to stop it as quick as you could? The answer is about the length of a football field, which is about 300 feet. Now, let me explain to you exactly why that is and what happens. And to do that, I want to draw it on the board for you. The first thing that we need to consider is something called perception time and distance. Now, what do we mean by perception? And I've always kind of made a joke out of this. If you're driving down the road and you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing and you're looking down the road and you're watching your mirrors and you're doing all the things that you do when you're out there driving that commercial vehicle, and let's say you looked in the mirror and then you look back and an old cow has jumped right out in front of you in the road. Well, the first thing you're going to say to yourself is, "Ah, shoot," right? But perception begins to take place from the time your eyes see the cow, and then your mind says, "Hey, I got to stop." And then your mind relays that information down to your foot. That is called perception time. You have perceived the hazard in the roadway. Well, that takes about 3/4 of a second for that to happen. If you're traveling at 55 miles per hour, you're traveling at approximately 80 or 81 feet per second. Well, it takes 3/4 of a second for the perception to occur. So in 3/4 of a second, traveling 55 miles an hour, you will travel approximately 60 feet. Approximately 60 feet in that 3/4 of a second. Now, the second thing that begins to happen is what we call reaction time. Your mind has perceived that cow out in the middle of the highway and has told your foot, to get off that dadgum accelerator and get on the brake pedal. So how fast can we react? Well, on average, reaction time also takes about 3/4 of a second. So again, traveling at 80 to 81 feet per second, 3/4 of that is going to be 60 feet. The next thing we want to talk about is braking distance. You perceived the hazard, took 3/4 of a second. You took your foot off of the accelerator and got it on the brake pedal, and that took about 3/4 of a second. And now our foot has gone on the brake pedal, it's locked the truck up, or locked the bus up, and now we're sliding. The effective braking distance on average, now when I say on average, I mean on a vehicle that's loaded with approximately 40,000 pounds, on dry roads, a nice, clean, sunshiny day, once those wheels lock up and they begin to slide, the vehicle is going to slide approximately 182 feet. So if you want to know how long does it take to stop a commercial vehicle in an emergency situation, all you got to do is add all those up and you'll come out to approximately 300 feet. In this case, the example is 302. So in most cases, it's going to be at least a football field, and in many cases, more. Okay, the new BAC, which is breath alcohol concentration level for commercial drivers to be considered intoxicated, is what? And the answer now is 0.04. If you're at 0.04 BAC, or breath alcohol concentration or breath alcohol level, you can be convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol if you're driving a commercial motor vehicle. That's just 0.04. That's less than half of what it used to be, which used to be 0.10. Now, talking about emergency steering, again, what do you do if a vehicle begins to swerve into your lane? What is your correct response? And if you recall a few minutes ago, we spoke about that, and we said in all situations, you must always steer to the right. Even if there's an oak tree sitting over there, you always steer to the right. Now, as we progress through the different questions here, you're going to see me repeating some, and the reason I'm repeating them is that we know they will show up on your CDL test when you go down to the state to take it. And we also know that repetition is one of the best ways to learn. And so I'll be asking a lot of the same questions. I'll be asking them a little differently in some cases, but we'll be doing a lot of repetition here today so that this material sticks with you. Okay, when should you test your parking brake? A, while the vehicle is moving at a very slow speed, or B, while the vehicle is parked, or while traveling at least 10 miles an hour, or D, when backing. And the correct answer, if you want to test your parking brake, you do it while the vehicle is parked. Now that just kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The way you would do that is that you're parked and you make sure that your parking brake is applied. Put the vehicle in gear and gently tug against it and make sure that the parking brake holds the vehicle. When doing the pre-trip inspection walk-around, which is that portion of the pre-trip inspection that you walk completely around your vehicle, checking the sides and the mirrors and the wheels and the springs and all the other items that you have to check, where should the key to the vehicle be? And the correct answer is always in your pocket. It just makes sense, doesn't it? The reason they want you to have it in your pocket is so that if you are crawling under the trailer or under the truck or under the bus, looking to see if the leaf springs are cracked or making sure that the brakes are operating properly, that somebody can't get in the front of the vehicle, start it up and drive it away and leave you as a little greasy spot on the pavement. So always have the key in your pocket when you're doing the walk-around inspection. If you become sleepy, you get tired while you're driving, what should you do? And the correct answer to that in all cases is get off the road as quickly as you can and get some sleep. that question can appear 2 or 3 times throughout the series of CDL test questions. It's so important. When you get sleepy, pull off the road and get some sleep. Let's talk about tread depth for a second on tires. What is the minimum amount of tread depth which is allowed on a steering tire? Those are the tires that are up on the steering axle that turn the vehicle. And the correct answer is 4/32 of an inch. You have to have at least 4/32 of an inch of tread depth on the steering tire. What about all the rest of the tires, though, on the vehicle? What can you get away with? What is the minimum amount of tread depth that you're allowed to have? And the answer is 2/32. So it's 4/32 on the steering tires and 2/32 on all of the other tires. Now, to correct a drive wheel braking skid, you should do what? Now, folks, a drive wheel braking skid is when your drive wheels lock up. On a straight vehicle, on a straight truck, or on a bus, that's going to be the rear wheels where the brakes are. If they lock up, what should you do? On a tractor trailer, it's going to be the rear wheels at the tractor, not necessarily at the trailer. And so the question is, in order to correct a drive wheel braking skid, what should you do? And the answer is, number one, of course, stop braking. You can't have a drive wheel braking skid unless your foot is on the brake pedal hard enough to lock those wheels up. And here's something that you want to know, that whenever wheels lock, the wheels that have locked up always want to take the lead. So if it's a drive wheel braking skid, that means that the wheels back at the back of the vehicle, or in the case of a tractor, at the rear of the tractor, if they lock up, they're going to want to take the lead, and they'll do it. In fact, they'll come around to the left, or they may come around to the right, but if you keep the brakes applied and keep those wheels locked up, eventually they'll come completely around, turn your vehicle completely around, and then you'll be going down the road backwards. That's what happens. So the correct response, if you get into a drive wheel braking skid, is to stop braking and then turn quickly and then counter steer. And counter steering just simply means turning in the opposite direction of that way that you had just turned. So stop braking, turn quickly, and then counter steer, and that will straighten the vehicle back up. Now, in tractor-trailer combinations, there are 2 types of jackknives that can occur. What are they? And the correct response here is that you can have a trailer jackknife and you can have a tractor jackknife. On a trailer jackknife, that only occurs when the rear wheels at the back of the trailer lock up. And like I said, any wheel that is locked up will always want to take the lead. Now, a tractor jackknife is when only the wheels at the rear of the tractor, not the trailer, but the tractor locked up, and they begin to spin out. And that's when the back of the tractor spins out to the side and the front of the tractor then comes back towards the trailer. That's called a trailer or a tractor jackknife. Now, how do you stop a tractor jackknife, or how do you stop a trailer jackknife? And it's obvious. You take your foot off the brake. Now, sometimes that's hard to do because there was a reason that you put your foot on the brake in the first place. But if you're maintaining a proper eye lead time and you're looking down the road 12 to 15 seconds all the time, then you'll never need to get into that kind of a situation because you'll see emergencies happening in enough time that you can take your foot off the accelerator and begin to slow down gradually. And that'll keep you out of those kind of situations. What is the proper action to take if your vehicle begins to hydroplane? Now, before we answer it, let me explain to you what hydroplane is. And the simplest way I ever found to explain hydroplaning is simply your tires, your wheels, begin to water ski. They actually lift off the ground and they will ride on top of a very thin film or surface of water. Now, this can occur at speeds as low as 30 miles an hour, and that will be one of the test questions. And it also occurs if you have poor tread on your tires. But at 30 miles an hour, a hydroplane can happen. So if you're going down the road and you hit a puddle of water or a lot of water on the roadway, you begin to hydroplane. What is your best course of action? And the simplest way is simply to take your foot off of the accelerator. Your vehicle will slow down and will then go back down to the road surface, and you'll quit the hydroplaning. Don't, however, slam on the brakes or turn the steering wheel, because as you're hydroplaning, you will have lost all of your steering control, and you can turn the wheel and you'll keep going in a straight line. But when it does come back down, it's going to go whichever way you turn the wheel. So always keep it straight. Okay, let's talk about going down downgrades again. We've already had one question about this, but we're going to talk again about it. When traveling down a downgrade, what should you never do? And the correct answer is never shift gears. If you recall on the last question we had about downgrades, what I said was you downshift into a lower gear before you start going down the hill. Now, there are a few other things that you need to remember about going downhill. And these are kind of called the 5 keys to safe downhill driving. The first is always use a lower gear than the one you use to go up the hill. Again, don't shift. And then always use the braking effects of the engine. Always use what they call snub braking. Now, let me explain snub braking to you. There's a lot of controversy out there on the proper way to go down a long downgrade so that you don't overheat your brakes and then lose your ability to stop. And then you have what they call a runaway truck. We recommend snub braking. And snub braking means this. You go down the hill, and when your speed reaches the safe speed for that hill. Now, what's the safe speed? The safe speed is defined as whatever the legal speed limit for trucks is on that hill. So let's say the safe speed is 40 miles an hour. When your speed reaches 40 miles an hour, you get on your brakes hard and firm, using about 20 or 22, maybe 25 pounds of pressure. You slow the vehicle down to at least 5 miles an hour under the safe speed. And then when you're at that speed, you take your foot off the brake. That's called snub braking, and that should prevent your brakes from overheating. And then the last key to safe downgrade driving, and this just kind of makes sense, is always keep your brakes adjusted. Okay, when going down a long or steep downgrade, you should always use what? And the answer is use the braking effects of the engine. And in order to do that, remember, you've got to be in the right gear, and the right gear will always be what? A lower gear than the one you used in order to crawl up the hill. Okay, you're driving a 40-foot-long vehicle at 25 miles per hour. What is the proper, safe following distance? So you remember the formula that we used? We said 1 second per 10 foot of vehicle length. So we have a 40-foot-long vehicle, so we know automatically we have to be at least 4 seconds behind the vehicle in front of us, right? And we said that's true for speeds up to, what, 40 miles per hour. When loading a trailer, if the load is loaded all to the rear of the trailer, what can happen? And the correct answer here that you'll be looking for on the CDL test is you can have, or you will have, poor traction on the drive wheels because you have all the weight back at the back of the trailer. But another thing to keep in mind is if you have all of the weight of your load back to the rear of the trailer, that's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. You've got too much weight back there, and you really don't want that. You want your weight to be equally distributed throughout the trailer. Okay, the next question, turn signals. When should you use them? Well, it's a simple answer. It says at least 100 feet before turning or changing lanes. Now let's talk about communications. What do we mean when we talk about communications as used in the same context with commercial vehicles? There are a lot of ways to communicate. Your turn signals can be a method of communication. And the question says communication means what? And the answer is to communicate your intentions to other motorists. And you can do that with your turn signals. You can do that with your brake lights. You certainly can do it with your four-way flashers, your hazard warning signals. Your horn can be another method of communication. And isn't there more than one way to use a horn? I mean, stop and think about it. If you're sitting there at a light and somebody walks in front of you and you want to say hi, you can just kind of tap the horn and go beep, beep, and wave at them and they'll wave back. Or if you're driving down the road and somebody begins to swerve in front of you, you can get on that air horn and really blast it, and that's a different form of communication. But it's all communication. So when we talk about communication, and as you hear me mention that word throughout this program, you'll know that we're talking about the different ways that we communicate our intentions to other motorists, or that they use to communicate their intentions to us. Okay, which of the following about the effects of alcohol is true? A, coffee will sober you up. B, only time will help a driver to sober up. If you eat first, you won't get drunk. Or D, a shot of whiskey contains more alcohol than a glass of beer. Well, the correct answer here is that only time will help a driver to sober up. But let me go through some of these. The first thing was, A, was coffee will sober you up. And again, that's a wives' tale, isn't it? If you drink a lot of good hot coffee, that's going to help get you sober so you can get out there and drive. Folks, that is absolutely bull Twinkies. What you'll be is a wide-awake drunk, but you're still going to be drunk. Time is the only thing that will help the effects of the alcohol to get away from you. And it dissipates at the rate of about 1 drink per hour. So if you sit down and drink 3 drinks, it's going to take 3 hours for that effect to get away. A shot of whiskey. Here's one of the incorrect answers. A shot of whiskey contains more alcohol than a glass of beer. The truth is that a shot of whiskey and a can of beer and a glass of wine all contain exactly the same amount of alcohol, and they'll all get you just as drunk. So always keep that in mind. And under these new regulations that we now have called 49 CFR Part 382, if you've had alcohol to drink before you report to work, and when you report to work, you're at 0.02 BAC up to 0.039, you can be told to go home and not be allowed to drive for a period of 24 hours. You flat will not be permitted to drive. If you're at 0.04 or higher BAC, and you're caught driving a commercial vehicle or reporting to work at that level, you can lose your job if that's what your company's employer policies and procedures are. But according to these new alcohol and drug regulations, what can happen is that you will be referred to a substance abuse professional and not allowed to drive until he evaluates you and determines whether or not you need to go through treatment. And if you do need to go through treatment, then you'll have to complete the treatment before you can ever again drive a commercial motor vehicle. It just isn't worth it. Don't drink and drive, and don't even drink before you're getting ready to drive. Okay, let's talk about mirrors for a second. Do trucks have blind spots, and can they be eliminated? And the correct answer is here, yes, trucks have blind spots. All trucks, all buses, all of them have blind spots, and you cannot eliminate the blind spots. You can put spot mirrors on there, or we also call those convex mirrors or bug-eye mirrors, and they will help to eliminate some of the blind spots. But you can never, ever eliminate all blind spots on a commercial motor vehicle. If you're looking ahead, the distance that you should be looking ahead as you're traveling down the highway, and you're traveling at highway speeds, about how far will that be? And the answer is 1/4 mile. Do you remember? At highway speeds, if you're looking down the road at what we call eye lead time, at least 12 to 15 seconds, then you will be looking down the road at least 1/4 mile. Okay, you are driving in heavy traffic. The speed limit is 45 miles per hour, but the traffic is moving at 35 miles per hour. What speed should you be driving? Well, the speed limit is 45, but the traffic is going at 35. What's the safe thing for you to do? Travel the same speed that all of the other traffic is traveling. That just makes sense. Now, don't you misunderstand me. I had a driver one time that that was out there and the speed limit was 55, and he said, well, all the cars and all the trucks out there were going 70 miles an hour, so I just went 70 and stayed with them, and that's what you said to do, go ever how fast all of them were going. Well, let me say this. You want to travel the same speed that all of the other vehicles are traveling up to the legal speed limit. So don't come back to me and try to tell me that story, and don't go tell your safety director that either. And don't you dare tell him that I told you it's okay to go over the speed limit just to keep up with the rest of the traffic. It's not. Up to the legal speed limit. If you are convicted for driving under the influence while driving a commercial vehicle, and this is your first offense, what will happen? And the answer is this. If you were driving under the influence of either alcohol or drugs, and as first offense, you will lose your license if convicted for a period of 1 year, unless you are hauling hazardous material, in which case the loss of license will be for 3 years. Folks, again, it just isn't worth it. Second conviction can cost you a 10-year suspension. At the end of 10 years, you'll be permitted to reapply to take your CDL, and assuming you get it back, if it happens a third time, then it becomes a permanent lifetime suspension. If you are stopped at a roadside rest and found to have a BAC or a BAL, what we call breath alcohol level or concentration of .02 up to 039, what will happen? And if you recall, I said a few moments ago, you will be placed out of service for 24 hours. Now let's talk about speed management for a second. With speed management, what will happen if you double your speed in terms of stopping distance? What does it do in terms of increasing your stopping distance? If you double your speed, your stopping distance will be increased by 4 times. So your stopping distance doesn't just double as your speed doubles. Each time your speed doubles, your stopping distance will increase by 4 times. So keep that in mind next time you start inching over the speed limit. Now we're going to talk about emergency driving for a second. Which of the following is true about emergency driving? A truck can always be stopped quicker than it can be steered. B, a truck can turn faster than it can stop. C, hard braking is always the best emergency braking maneuver. And D, a truck, because of air brakes, can stop quicker than a car. Folks, the correct answer is B. A truck can turn faster than it can stop. And the correct response in an emergency situation many times is to attempt to steer around the emergency as opposed to trying to lock it down and stop. So just keep